2 weeks ago, Congress concluded its quarterly Kabuki theater performance, where House and Senate leaders cut deals in secret, then wait until 3 days before a government shutdown and try and cram a 1,547-page piece of legislation through both chambers before anyone has a chance to read it. I would personally like to thank Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk for their role in helping to defeat the original continuing resolution House Speaker Mike Johnson tried to cram through Congress. As a former Indiana state representative, I am going to briefly discuss two provisions in the Indiana Constitution that I believe should be amended into the United States Constitution to prevent the type of political theater we witnessed last month with the original, quote, bipartisan continuing resolution created by Hakeem Jeffries, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, and Mike Johnson. I am then going to discuss in detail one paragraph buried on page 139 of that 1,547-page abomination of a bill, because it illustrates how congressional leadership was working through the United States Department of Defense and the U.S. Department of State to undermine the First Amendment rights of American citizens. I am Dr. John Padfield, an engineer turned state representative turned business professor, and this is Business Reform, where we discuss issues at the intersection of business, technology, and society. To fully appreciate why the Indiana Constitution has these key provisions, you need to know a couple of important events in Indiana's history. Indiana was originally part of the Northwest Territory, which was established in 1787. In 1800, it became the Indiana Territory, and in 1816, it was admitted to the United States as it became the 19th state. Indiana's first governor, Jonathan Jennings, wasted no time in launching infrastructure improvement projects, such as building a canal around the falls of the Ohio near present-day Louisville, Kentucky. Subsequent Indiana governors followed suit with numerous additional infrastructure projects, and by 1841, just 25 years after becoming a state, Indiana was already more than $13 million in debt and couldn't even pay the interest on what it owed. The state was in default on its financial obligations and had to sell the public works projects to creditors to reduce the state's debt. In 1851, just 35 years after becoming a state, Indiana adopted an entirely new constitution that had a whole series of provisions intended to make the state more financially responsible. We don't have time to go into all the constitutional restraints, but here are a couple of the most important ones. Article 4 of the Indiana Constitution details how the legislative branch of government must work. Section 19 reads, quote, "An act, except an act for the codification, revision, or rearrangement of laws, shall be confined to one subject and matters properly connected therewith." In other words, in Indiana, it would be unconstitutional to create a 1,547-page monstrosity like the continuing resolution Speaker Johnson tried to cram through the U.S. House on December 18th. Furthermore, Article 4, Section 20 reads, quote, "Every act and joint resolution shall be plainly worded, avoiding, as far as practicable, the use of technical terms." Another important provision that has kept Indiana out of financial trouble for the past 173 years can be found in Article 5, which details how the state's finances must work. Article 5, Section 5C reads, quote, "The total amount of expense appropriations enacted by the General Assembly for a biennial budget may not exceed the estimated revenue of the state in the biennial budget period." Indiana doesn't operate by passing a continuing resolution every 3 months. Indiana passes a state budget every other year, and our Constitution requires that it be a balanced budget. The state is constitutionally prohibited from spending more money than it legitimately estimates it will take in. If Congress had to operate under these constitutional constraints, it would put an end to a lot of the political theater performances we see on the floor of the U.S. House and U.S. Senate. Now let's turn our attention to just one paragraph buried on page 139 of the 1,547-page bipartisan bill that Speaker Mike Johnson tried to cram through Congress in a matter of hours on December 18th. The bill had a Flesch-Kincaid grade level score of 17.9. That means it was written at a level for people with a postgraduate degree, and the typical reading speed for material written at this level is around 150 words per minute. At 1,547 pages, it would take a person with a postgraduate degree reading nonstop around 30 hours just to read the bill, and that doesn't even count asking questions, discussing it with colleagues, or contemplating the pros and cons of the legislation. Speaker Johnson was originally planning to hold a vote on this bill the same day that he made it available to members of Congress, thus ensuring nobody had a chance to read it. The continuing resolution contained a lot of things completely unrelated to keeping the federal government running, such as a new football stadium in Washington, D.C., and a fee raise for members of Congress, to reward them for all the stellar work they've been doing. And by the way, the Indiana Constitution has a great solution for legislative pay issues. Article 4, Section 29 states the General Assembly's compensation will be set by law, meaning they can vote for a pay raise anytime they want. However, the pay raise will not go into effect until after the next election, so if voters don't like the timing or the size of the raise the legislature gives itself, the voters can prevent their current representative or senator from ever seeing that raise. I think that is genius. But what I want to focus on for the remainder of this video is Section 301 of the continuing resolution Speaker Johnson introduced into the U.S. House on December 18th. That section is titled Global Engagement Center Extension, and it reads, quote, Section 1287 of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal 2017 is amended by striking on the date that is 8 years after the date of enactment of this act, and inserting on the date that is 9 years after the date of enactment of this act. I know I might as well have been speaking a foreign language on that last slide. That paragraph doesn't mean anything to most people because they are not familiar with the Global Engagement Center or why it was funded through the National Defense Authorization Act of 2017. Allow me to explain why this is a very big deal. If you want more details, please see the video I posted in September 2022 titled, Did Facebook Experiment on You? But here is the short version. In 2008, the United States Department of Defense created a program called the Minerva Initiative, with the goal of improving the DoD's basic understanding of the social, cultural, behavioral, and political forces that shapes regions of the world of strategic importance to the United States. Minerva is the Roman goddess of wisdom and war. I have Minerva's Greek counterpart, Athena, on my desk over my left shoulder. In 2014, the Minerva Initiative funded academic research on, quote, belief formulation and emotional contagion, along with several similar topics all related to belief propagation and movements for change. Emotional contagion is defined as a phenomenon of automatic adoption of an emotional state of another person. And in June 2014, the National Academy of Science published an article about research Facebook conducted on its users without their informed consent, which demonstrated, quote, experimental evidence of massive-scale emotional contagion through social networks. In other words, social media was already viewed by the Department of Defense as a new battlefield well over a decade ago. In 2017, as a part of the National Defense Authorization Act, Congress allocated money for the U.S. Department of State to create the Global Engagement Center, which had a mission to direct the U.S. federal government's efforts to counter foreign propaganda and disinformation efforts aimed at undermining policies of the United States and its allies. The funding for the Global Engagement Center contained in the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act was for 8 years, which means it was set to expire in December 2024. You may be thinking this all makes sense. We know foreign countries publish propaganda and attempt to meddle in U.S. affairs, just as the Twitter files conclusively proved the United States Department of Defense has done in other countries. You may not remember reading about this because it didn't get a lot of attention in the mainstream media, But at the same time, it was not limited to right-wing news sites. This particular article was published in Rolling Stone. But the biggest controversy surrounding the Global Engagement Center involves allegations they use taxpayer dollars to censor conservative news outlets in the United States. Last year, the state of Texas sued the U.S. Department of State and the Global Engagement Center. That lawsuit alleged, among many other things, that the Global Engagement Center is, quote, actively intervening in the news media market to render disfavored press outlets unprofitable by funding the infrastructure, development, and marketing and promotion of censorship technology and private censorship enterprises to covertly suppress speech of a segment of the American press. The Biden administration attempted to have the lawsuit dismissed, but in May of 2024, U.S. District Judge Jeremy Knodel ruled that there were sufficient grounds for the case to proceed. However, because funding for the Global Engagement Center was set to expire in December 2024, the lawsuit was practically meaningless because the Global Engagement Center was going to shut down before the lawsuit went to trial. That is, until Hakeem Jeffries, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, and Mike Johnson agreed to bury Section 301 in the continuing resolution that Speaker Johnson dropped in the U.S. House on December 18, 2024, and tried to get passed before anyone could read it. Thankfully, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk began posting on X about just how bad this continuing resolution was, and Speaker Johnson was forced to pull the original continuing resolution and cut over 90% of it to get a resolution that would pass and keep the government running past December 20th. When the continuing resolution was withdrawn, House Minority Leader Jeffries protested that it was a bipartisan bill that Johnson had already agreed to, but virtually no one outside of these four legislative quote-unquote leaders had even seen the bill because it was negotiated in secret, then dropped just a couple of days before the government shutdown. Personally, I don't trust any of these guys, and I am hoping they all get voted out of office or retire. But what do you think? If you had to choose between today's congressional leaders, the guy in the white van, or gas station sushi, which one do you trust the most? Also, do you agree with me the United States Constitution should be amended to require a balanced budget and to limit all legislation to single subject matters like the Indiana Constitution requires the Indiana General Assembly to do? I can't wait to read your comments.